Back. Let's look at Rigoberto Gonzalez's Casa. This is from the forums. If you have your forums, number 3, I asked you to read Rigoberto Gonzalez's Casa. This poem is told from the point of view of a house. How would you characterize the tone, the feelings, the thought process of the house? In this poem, it's goes against Poetry 101. A lot of times you're never supposed to anthropomorphize inanimate objects and give them human-like characteristics. This is what we get a lot in our children's literature when we read when we were little. Animals, things, human-like characteristics. This poem, though, it works. It's a masterpiece. I love Gonzalez is a master. Casa, Spanish, right? I mean, a great poem, a great text, a great paper would be, which would be one of the questions I pass out next week or the week after. Look at Dagoberto Gilb's Romero's shirt and look at Rigoberto Gonzalez's Casa. Idea of work, the American dream, what we want, what we get, etc., etc., etc. Probably a longer poem. Let's look at Casa, all right? From the point of view of a house. I am not your mother. I will not be moved by the grief or attitude of men who weep like orphans at my door. I am not a church. I do not answer prayers, but I never turn them down. Come in and kneel, or sit, or stand. The burden of your weight won't lessen no matter the length of your admission. Tell me anything you want. I have to listen, but don't expect me to respond when you tell me you have lost your job, or that your wife has found another love, or that your children took their laughter to another town. You feel alone and empty? Color me surprised. I didn't notice they were gone. Despite the row of faces pinned like medals to my walls, I didn't earn them. The scratches on the wood are not my scars. If there's a smell of spices in the air, blame the trickery of kitchens or your sad addiction to the yesterdays that never keep, no matter how much you believe they will. I am not a time capsule. I do not value pithy things like locks of hair and milk teeth and ticket stubs and promise rings. Mere particles of dust I'd blow out to the street if I could sneeze. Take your high school jersey and your woman's wedding dress away from me. Sentimental hoarding bothers me. So off with you, old couch that cries in coins as it gets dragged out to the porch. Farewell, cold bed that breaks its bones in protest to eviction or foreclosure or whatever launched this grim parade of the exits. I am not a pet. I do not feel abandonment. Sometimes I don't even see you come or go or stay behind. My windows are your eyes, not mine. If you should die inside me, I'll leave it up to you to tell the neighbors. Shut the heaters off. I do not fear the cold. I'm not the one who shrinks into the corner of the floor because whatever made you think this was a home with warmth isn't here to sweet talk anymore. Don't look at me that way. I'm not to blame. I granted nothing to the immigrant or exile that I didn't give a border crosser or a native born. I am not a prize or a wish come true. I am not a fairy tale castle, though I used to be, in some distant land inhabited by dreamers now extinct. Who knows what happened there? In any case, good riddance, grotesque fantasy and mirth. So long, wall to wall disguise in vulgar suede and chintz. Take care, you fool, and don't forget that I am just a house, a structure without soul for those whose patron saints are longing and despair. If we were in class, and you could do this on the sheet if you want, or on a scrap piece of paper, relating to the American dream. What's a house? What does a house to us represent? What is a house supposed to mean? Do you watch the house porn, House Hunters, all those HGTV shows? The house, the American dream, right? To buy a house, To make a house a home, what's the house represent? We think of a house as a living, breathing thing. It collects all of our memories, all the holidays, all the family, all this. Its windows are our eyes, the soul. This poem is talking against that. And if you look at and I want you to disagree. Email me and disagree with me. Uh, how would you characterize the tone, the feelings, the thought process of the house? Usually, when people first read this poem, they think of the tone as angry or upset or dark. Personally, I read the tone as complete indifference. Think about this too. When we argue with somebody, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, friend, mother, father, relative, the when they get angry at us, that means they still care. What's worse than anger is complete indifference. When you're upset with somebody or someone does something and they're just like, whatever, the house is completely indifferent. It's not angry. It does not care. Let's just, instead of, we don't have, this is a longer poem. We don't have time to close read the whole thing. You could look at each 5-line stanza, cinquain is what it's called. And before, remember how I had you underline a line, circle a line? You can do that for a stanza. On a longer poem, you wouldn't want to do that. You could do that for a stanza. And on the side of each stanza, what's going on in the stanza? I am not your mother. House. We think of a house as warmth, right? All the signs hanging in a house. I will not be moved by the grief or gratitude of men who weep like orphans at my door. I'm indifferent. I am not a church. Come in and kneel or sit or stand. What do people say? Come on inside. Take a load off. Lay your weary burden down. This house doesn't care. The house doesn't care. Tell me anything you want. I have to listen, but don't expect me to respond. Don't tell me when you respond when you've lost your job, your wife found other love, your children have gone away. You feel alone and empty. Color me surprised. I didn't notice they were gone. Think of this too. What do we do in the house? The faces pinned like medals to my walls. We put the rows of pictures from school. We hang mementos, all the photos, the trophies, the jerseys. Why do we? I'm thinking. And I would ask this too. What we have like little keepsakes, right? And we have this in here. I am not a time capsule. I do not value pithy things like locks of hair and milk teeth and ticket stubs and promise rings. Do any of you keep like movie ticket stubs, concert tickets, any little things like that around? Why? What are they? I do. I keep things. What do they do? What do they represent? Memories. I have lived. This is my life. Take your high school jersey and your women's wedding dress away from me. Sentimental hoarding bothers me. We're sentimental if we hold on to those things. So off with you, old couch that cries and coins as it gets dragged out to the porch. Imagery here and sound. You can imagine the couch getting dragged, the chains jangling. I am not a pet. I do not feel abandonment. Sometimes I don't even see you come or go or stay behind. If you should die inside me, I'll leave it up to you to tell the neighbors. How would you tell the neighbors? Smell of the rotting body. I like this moment. I granted nothing to the immigrant or exile that I didn't give a border crosser or a native born. The house doesn't care. The house doesn't care who you are, what you want, what your hopes and dreams are. The house is just a house. I am not a prize or a wish come true. So you can tie this together with Romero's shirt. Look at Romero's idea of his house because he does take pride in it, right? He loves his house. But is it, I don't know, it's not everything he wanted. And this house, Casa, why isn't it just house? Casa is important. Is a house different for different people? This house doesn't say so, but we think so, right? Take care, you fool, and don't forget that I am just a house, a structure without soul, for those whose patron saints are longing and despair. This poem, if we look at our initial poem sheet, a few notes on reading poetry, does the poem exhibit complexity? Or how does the speaker of the poem talk about seemingly ordinary everyday things in new or strange ways? We have it completely upends our idea of what a house represents, right? We think of a house, it's a goal, it's a wish come true. That's our goal. American dream. Get college degree, we get the job making the money, we get the marriage, we get the kids, we get the house. Then what? The house is a box to be checked off. We put these ideas on the house, these wishes, thoughts, expectations. The house doesn't care. The house is a house, is a house. It's a structure. It doesn't have feelings. I want to look at this poem briefly. Completely, it's not related to Rigoberto Gonzalez's Casa, and I don't really have any notes prepared on it. I like this poem. Someone in my last class, last semester, read this poem to their mom, and their mom got so angry. She wanted to contact me and report me or do something. I don't know why. But she said, "This isn't poetry." She was angry. It's a brutal poem. And we're going to read this poem. The next video is going to be on James Tate and Yusuf Kumunyaka about war poetry. And the final video will be Laura McCullough, Danusha Lamaras. This poem is the right next to Casa, Toy Derricote's Boy at the Paterson Falls. Toy Derricote's world famous African American poet. She's amazing. She's a genius. Brutal poem though. Let's look at it. Boy at the Paterson Falls. I'm thinking of that boy who bragged about the day he threw a dog over and watched it struggle to stay upright all the way down. I'm thinking of that rotting carcass on the rocks, and the child with such power he could call to a helpless thing as if it were its friend, capture it, and think of the cruelest punishment. It must have answered some need, some silent screaming in a closet, a motherless call when night came crashing. It must have satisfied, for he seemed joyful, proud, as if he had once made a great creation out of murder. That body on the rocks, its sharp angles, slowly took shape of what was underneath, bones pounded, until it lay on the bottom like a scraggly rug. Nothing remains but a memory, and the suffering of those who would walk into the soft hands of a killer for a crumb of bread. I think the initial reaction, think of this poem with disgrace, right? Dogs, David Lurie. We hate this boy, don't we? We want this boy. We want to throw the boy off the Paterson Falls. Would we agree? I mean, this is a horrible, horrible thing, monstrous thing. And what the speaker is doing is so complicated, so difficult, and it's not humanizing. Or is it? Is it humanizing the boy? It's not forgiving the boy. It's not, it's condemning but not overly harsh. It's calling out that this boy did a horrific thing. But look at it's looking at why, how. It must have answered some need. Why? It must have answered some need. Some silent screaming in a closet, a motherless call when night came crashing. But it's not dismissing the horrific act. Nothing remains but a memory, and the suffering of those who would walk into the soft hands of a killer for a crumb of bread. She calls him killer, right? The boy is a killer. And we think of the suffering of those who would walk into the soft hands of a killer for a crumb of bread. Brutal poem. The boy that bragged about the day. The speaker just knows the boy bragging about the day he threw a dog over and watched it struggle to stay upright. Horrific image. But what the poem does and the poet does, for my money, the most powerful moments are in the end. Nothing remains but a memory. And the final, we have the M dash there between memory and the suffering of those who would walk into the soft hands of a killer for a crumb of bread.